here. Said she might be coming. Kim
There
Rada.
she is. She just got in.
Okay. Oh, now we can start. Sorry about that. Call the meeting to order at 6:30, and we'll start with a roll call. Let me just hold on. Look us up. So, BG.
Here.
Thank you. Kim Rada. Don't see her at the moment. Dave Nagel.
Here.
Leanne Mankey.
Here.
Christopher Riley.
Here.
And I think that's it for members. So we have a quorum.
Lisa Maston is here.
Yep. I see Lisa.
Sorry, I'm here.
No, no worries. All right. So, do we have any next on the agenda? Public comment. Our resident public person, Diane, do you have any comments?
Not at this time.
Okay. Did anybody get a chance to look at the minutes from the prior meeting? From the special meeting in February?
I didn't get them.
Yeah, I don't know if I received them either.
Okay. I'll put that out. No problem. I'll get that squared away. So we'll table that for this evening. All right. The big item, the review of the town council presentation. For the two that did the 98% of the lifting there, Leanne and Christopher, thank you very much. I think you guys did a good job. If you guys haven't seen it, if you weren't there, you can always log on the town YouTube channel and review it. If you have any questions or want to get an idea of the feedback we got, etc. I was taking some notes as we went and jotted down some feedback that I remember from council. I'm sure others did as well, and may not marry up with what I wrote down, but maybe we need to talk about some of those items. If you guys wanted to do that.
Sure.
Okay.
I did wanted to let you know, I agreed with most of the items that you have on here. In fact, all of them, a couple of supplemental items after the meeting, because I stayed till the end.
Okay.
Diane and I caught up with a couple of the counselors and got a little bit more feedback, as well as, their thoughts about what we could address in terms of items where there were questions. One of the big things that were talked about was potentially offering options, and
Right.
It was compared to the pool project, which was kind of a very fast track thing last spring, so the time frame is not comparable.
Right.
However, having been on this particular committee for so long, I can tell you there have been various iterations of and options, if you will, if you want to call them that,
Right.
that we could explore by going back into our into our records of the LARC committee. We actually had some concept drawings that had a particular plan in place. I do know that with the architect, another option that was discussed was phasing, and we did discuss that with this architect.
Mhm.
And so I think it might behoove us to go back into the records rather than reinvent the wheel. The work has been done, we can show it, but it is in the records. It's just over the course of 10 years.
Understood. I understand. And if it's something that we could put a price tag on potentially, because if at some point we're going to have to, I think my feeling is they want to see options with prices, because I think they want to see something a little less than 43 million, probably a lot less, but it is what it is. But I think those are the kind of options. I mean, we can show an option, but the bottom line is I think they're going to want a price tag associated with it.
Well, the problem with the timing element is that those price tags will be obsolete.
Understood. I guess the question is it something that this architect would be able to put some prices on, or because it's not their work, they're not going to want to touch it?
Well, I think the phasing aspect we can discuss with our architect, because he was the one who discussed phasing
Okay.
not being the ideal way to go. I think he could give us some spin on that. The previous iteration that was drawn before COVID and before we were asked to be tabled by the town hall, I mean, we're talking that was what, 2017?
Right.
So
Sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, and so we're talking that it, you know, I don't think even if we have pricing there, it's not apples to oranges. And also
Right.
because of the various studies that were done subsequently, that's why that design has changed. And we can describe that, but I don't know if he'd be willing to look at it and give us a ballpark. The other option that we heard was satellite, like having a branch, and
Yep.
that brings an entirely different, first of all, you have to have the property, and second of all, you have to staff it. And that becomes a future maintenance nightmare in terms of costs, because I think the staffing aspect, and Lisa can speak to that better than I, but I think it becomes an issue. But I did want to make you aware that all these things have been explored. They've just been over time versus all at the same time.
And I think those are good discussions to have. So at least we can, when we go back, we can talk to council. Yes, we've considered the satellite office, but we anticipate the staffing costs and the maintenance costs of an additional building, you know, are going to be outside of what the town ultimately wants to do. So at least that we can say that, hey, yeah, we've looked at it, we've addressed it. Here's our position on it, and
Yeah, kind of just putting out like, you know, pros and cons of, you know, this is kind of why we decided not to go this way. You know, we did consider it, we did look at it, but this is the reasons why we didn't decide on this. And because I think kind of going back to what you were saying with like the pool project was, I think at least from what I gathered from a lot of people was, you know, they put out there was the one option that was presented, and then there was no other options put out there. There was no reasons why. Well, yes, we did think about, you know, maybe they maybe in committee they did, you know, think about these other options, but they didn't, you know, present, you know, why they didn't go with those options. There might have been good reasons for that. And I think that transparency is what I think a lot of people were kind of looking for. So I think if we do that as the library and say, okay, well, here's the various other options that are available, and, you know, were available, but this is why they wouldn't work, you know, basically.
yeah,
There were options that we have, which Leanne just mentioned to over several previous committees and whatever. Then we kept reiterating that this was a concept. It's not the final
right.
thing. And of course, as we all know, the ultimate problem is with a referendum, you have to have a figure attached to it. So many of the questions I know we have, and a previous iteration of this group, and I think the library board have been discussed, which they brought up, and I brought up some of them earlier on, knowing full well that, you know, it may not fly. I personally want to mention that I didn't discuss it with anyone else in terms of what I thought or didn't think with other members of the council one way or another. Just let them say what they want to say. But I know, and many people here know, that some of those questions we had addressed time and again. But then again, what is asked of us is a presentation and kind of a figure. And I guess the word concept didn't sink in either.
Yeah. But like you said, the bottom line is they're looking at that number because
Yes.
you know, and as you know, you're on council. So, and I, in my heart, I know you guys want this to move forward and be successful. So I think that's why you're asking us to kind of temper that cost a bit, to say, look, we want to get this through, but we need a number that we feel the public is going to at least nibble on, that so we can move it forward.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you think one of the things when we were just dealing with spitballing ideas as the board?
Yeah.
We had people coming up with some really way out there concepts like a rooftop garden or a
An
telescope
observatory. Yeah.
observatory. I mean, those are things that the board said this is just not feasible financially. I mean, if you want to have this is what we were looking at, the Taj Mahal versus this is what we've come back to. I mean, we can come back to that, but as I said, the board was being realistic from the start. So I guess would we be served to say, well, we looked at all these crazy things, but we brought it back into more of a realistic viewpoint. I don't know. Like I said, what they've got is what we kind of fine-tuned to what we think we will need in the future.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess I'm too close to it to be able to have a realistic viewpoint in terms of being looking at it without all the side knowledge,
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm obviously a little more detached, but I'm also very aware of the cost figures, as a resident and working for the town, et cetera. So, I don't know how to quite balance that. Well, on the other couple of designs that you may have that have been done in the past, do any of them, are they less square footage than what this one is? Do you think? Do you remember? If you don't know, we can.
I don't remember the square
Okay.
footage. Maybe Diane or Lisa do.
They're the square, they did, I thought Leslie gave us, less square footage, like kind of two options. The ideal one would be this,
Right.
and which makes more sense if you're trying to plan for the future too.
Yeah.
That was the big intent.
Is there a possibility of providing them with the cost of maybe similar construction in the relative area? Because I'm thinking one of the things that often comes up is people who, and I'm not saying the town council is this, but they're thinking about selling this or actually convincing the public that this is the cost, this is what would be needed. And I'm wondering if there's the opportunity to compare it to, sometimes people get into this sort of competition with like other towns kind of thing, and being able to compare, hey, this is what it costs nowadays roughly to get something that's actually going to serve us for the next 30 years or whatever the time frame is. I'm wondering
I
about
was
that.
actually asked at the meeting the other night through your presentation, can you give us some comparable things? And I know in the past we've had some, but I don't know if they're valid now.
Well, the
I
thing
do
is that
remember that go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I do remember that what other towns wanted to do wasn't necessarily what we wanted to do, and some had larger collections or
Yeah.
were larger cities than ours, so it's hard to compare, but
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've looked at, one of the points I was making is we have gone out and looked at other people's additions, renovations, etc. And every library is different, particularly when you're talking about, I'm sorry, there was another option that was discounted that I want to throw out there, which was something the Board of Trustees is not big on, so it was discounted. But it is a possibility to throw out there, which is to raise the whole thing and start fresh. I don't know that would be welcomed by the community. I know the Board of Trustees did not explore that possibility very deeply because of it's just not a topic they want to go there. But that's not saying it isn't an option that the building committee wouldn't investigate. But regarding a comparative, the problem you have here is a lot of this work that's been done in recent times, construction costs have ballooned considerably.
Yes, they have.
So you can't specifically say, well, Bloomfield did this and it cost them that. Why is it going to cost us this much more? Well, I mean, you can't even.
But there are proofs of the fact that construction costs have ballooned. Is that the kind of information we can make available for when, like the town council is getting like queried on this stuff? So they
Well,
have that for themselves?
I think you can, but the problem is that a lot of folks will look at it, instead of looking at it at apples and oranges, they're going to look at apples to apples. They're going to say, well, Bloomfield costs this, not realizing you're talking a 5 year ago kind of construction aspect and the differences in what
Well,
you're
how about
talking
we extrapolate what Bloomfield costs to today?
Yeah,
That,
we
yeah,
could do that.
yeah,
Because
that was kind of what I was thinking, is that if you have a comparable, I'll say, square footage, or over building, if you can determine a reasonable scale factor for what's the increase in cost, maybe that can bring it back to apples to show we are within line, or maybe even less, I don't know, than what a comparable one was.
And maybe even take one step further and project the cost of construction of the town hall to today's rates and see how it is, if it's, is it more or less than what we're proposing today. And just so if it's more, you can say, look, if you're building town hall today, it's going to cost you 45. We're asking for, just, that's kind of something that I think that they could wrap their heads around, because it's recent, it's in town.
Yeah.
You know.
One of the other things I just wanted to bring up too was, in my discussions with Sonia, one of the things that she has suggested is looking at how I'll say libraries, maybe even on like the West Coast, so Connecticut's a high cost state,
Mhm.
finding a similar place, California or wherever and everything like that, where they've done libraries. How did they get to their funding amount and everything? Because I'm sure that it probably wasn't cheap for them to renovate some of their things and everything. So that, I don't know if that may be useful as another comparable when presenting to the town, or whether we want to stay more local. But that was one thing that she had mentioned to me, was to, if we're trying to figure out how we're going to, raise all the funds for that and everything, it might be good to see how some of those other high cost states did the same.
Yeah. I did just on my own, because council did ask, how much did you figure the board was going to contribute, et cetera. And I know, Leanne, you said in '88 they raised $800,000. So I just did an inflation calculator, and that's about 2.1 million today. So I don't know if that's something that
Well,
the board.
the problem I'm worried about, and this is what the board is worried, we don't want to say we will raise $2 million and
course.
then we only raise $1.5 million. That's the
Yep.
kind of thing that we want to do. It's the same reason that when they asked what the board would contribute, we
Mhm.
wanted to point out we've already put in $500,000 of raised monies, and obviously we report it. And I used the $800,000 from 1988 as a figure to impress that in dollars of 1988, like you said, it's two and a half. It would be incredible if we could do so. Certainly the goal would be that, and whatever else we can get.
Of course.
But what I'm leery of saying is the board commits to X amount of dollars and we don't raise it.
Right. No, I do.
So we would have to, I think that would be right now. And again, I mentioned that the board has gone back to our investment counselor to see what we need to maintain our operating budget, which is critical,
Mhm.
as well as those encumbered funds. And he's working to extrapolate it out 10 years to where we could potentially on a conservative level be, but I don't have those numbers yet.
Right. I understand that. So as far as options, I don't know. I'm going to ask a question, because I obviously wasn't involved in any of those. Because I know the 88 edition, attaching it to the old building, that's where you had a lot of those leak problems and along the skylight there, right? Something, is that's fair?
Yes.
And and the new building, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're attaching a new building, a new building to the old. Was it ever considered to make like a covered, basically a hallway type of situation for less detachment to that building from the new building to that? I don't know if that saves costs. I know the look is a little wonky, but I don't know if that was ever discussed, considered, and this is just me thinking that it may reduce some costs and potential future issues, I don't know.
Well, I do know it was considered.
Okay.
With the architect. We had, we considered basically, a different type of, joint, if you will, between the two.
Yep.
As well, not only just for cost, but for aesthetics, the old
Yeah.
versus the new, because that's another concern that several people have expressed. They want to,
Right. Yep. They like that look. Yep.
But the architect approached this with the best way to integrate it. And
Mhm.
if you look at the way this is drawn now, we're not talking about a bunch of atrium systems now. It's a roof.
I got you. Yep.
So that's hopefully going to eliminate all water issues that we currently have. And those were a lot of the things that we were dealing with structurally. We still have this structural engineer aspect to find out what we can do in that old building in terms of load. But the intent is to keep it reading room, etc., and not overload the building anyway. I mean, certainly, I don't think anything is off the table here. And obviously, a building committee could decide that that would be the best way to approach it.
Right. They could, certainly. I do know that in some other towns in the last 10 years, there have, for library renovations, there has been a town that would say, okay, library, we're giving you referendums for 12. You guys have to raise the other XYZ, whatever that number is. I don't know if that's, again, I know you don't want to fall into that trap if you fall short. I get that. I don't know if that's something the council would consider, but.
Well, the problem is if they decide, say the council says you can have, we're going to go to referendum for 20.
Yep.
It's like the phasing aspect. If we do phasing, for example, what we do is we get rid of what is an inadequately functioning space.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lose, say we don't put the community room on, or say the children's department doesn't get added. I mean, these are the kind of things that happen with phasing. So what happens is you get phase one and then phase two doesn't happen. So now you're trying to configure within that old space and phase one, all the things that you were going to put in phase 2 and 3. I think that's the concern there.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I get it. The other thing is, I believe that Weathersfield, and maybe Lisa knows for sure, I believe they're actually redoing their library now, and I think it's just like a renovation. So I
was just there last Saturday, Eric, because they're picking. Brooke just wanted people's opinion on carpet and colors and stuff. So I was there, and it's like a 1.4, 1.2, $1.4 million renovation, and it's basically they're putting in it like an actual teen area and new carpet, and they're redoing some other space because their children's department had a big flood. I think it was
because that was on the lower level, right? The children's,
right, and so they got a lot of insurance money to do that, but they were actually renovated when probably 10 years ago. They actually had a renovation.
Okay.
So they've had a bigger renovation, and this is more of a
sprucing up.
Yeah, I mean, not that, I mean, 1.2, 1.4 million is nothing to sneeze at, but more of it was to renovate some of the space to make it, they're like not adding square footage or anything like that. They're just repurposing some of the space. I was just thinking about when you were talking about Bloomfield, one of the things that happened to Bloomfield is that they were given, I think the referendum was like 37 million. And 27 was going to go to the main branch, and then 10 was to the one of the satellite branches. And then they were over $10 million already in the budget. So they were given a certain amount and it wasn't adequate, and they went way over their budget. So, my concern sometimes is when you go for less than what you really need, because I think that's kind of what happened with the town hall, is that it ended up being a lot more than what the referendum said. But also, my take on the meeting Tuesday was that, obviously the big concern is the dollar amount. And, I'm hoping we can find more grant money. I'm a little concerned about that, but that's what Sonia's there for, to help us maybe try to tap some of these resources that we don't even know about.
Right.
But yeah, Weathersfield is not, it's really, like you said, a sprucing up or repurposing space.
Well, and
with
aren't
the
they
Right.
part of, they're part of a municipal building, right?
They're actually attached to the town hall.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So I guess I'm just kind of bringing that up is that, we should be aware of somebody on council, somebody in public says, oh, well, they're redoing Weathersfield for 1.5. Why, I think we just have to address that.
But also Weathersfield got a major renovation 10 years
Mhm.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
like I said, we can just say they're just reallocating space is what they're doing. They're not
Right.
doing anything more. They're just shuffling the cards on, the chairs on the deck, so to speak,
Right.
and picking up color swatches.
And that is
Right.
costing them some millions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is to extrapolate it out and say, this is what we're anticipating we need.
Mhm.
I mean, we have to stress services that are going to be provided with this additional space. It's not just like we all have a little more room to breathe, which is the case as well. But we have to be able to stress how much more this will serve the community.
Yeah.
Right.
We talked a lot about challenges and limitations the other night, and I think that's part of the sales pitch to say this is where we are and this is where we could be.
Mhm.
But again, like I said, I'm not quite sure how to. I don't know that our architect. I think we could talk with them about potentially looking at what we had before, but again, I can speak to the fact that the design that we came up with for 2017
Mhm.
is completely obsolete now because we have all the concerns of COVID and everything else that now we have to build in, which again is there. People don't realize what a square foot build-in now you have to have for all those spaces that you got to consider. I know that when COVID first hit, when you have such a tight space as our current library, it was a real challenge. I mean, now they have all the plastic sheeting and everything else, but in the meantime, there was no way you could be 6 feet away from anybody because
Right.
there is no 6 feet gap.
Right.
So I mean, those are the kind of things that changed in terms of spacing.
So for that, I think I'll pitch that back to the board and the building committee if you guys want to pull out some of those things and look at it and have some just brief discussions about it. I'm not asking you to float it before your architect because I don't want you guys to get billed needlessly if we don't have to. But if it's something we can at least present to council and say, hey, this was an older iteration, pre-COVID, so obviously COVID changed some things. This design isn't going to really be as functional for us today. But if it's something that they bite on and they're going to want numbers on, then we can move forward with that. But
another aspect of that, because we did address things like children's room and teen space and things like that. I don't think the words makerspace ever crossed our lips before that.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that, I mean, we're looking at. I mean, flexibility was key, but it's becoming.
But I also think community space is really your keyword. That different organizations, people can use the space differently because there's just not a lot of it in town. And the more organizations that can benefit, I think the more support you get.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I mean, even I ventured online and just looked at some of the comments, and someone said, "Well, why don't you just use the community space over at the town hall area and everything?" And I'm like, well, if I remember, I mean, that kind of got cut down quite a bit, which is why we're trying to increase our community space to offer it to the town.
But also availability. I
Yeah.
mean, and what community space are they talking about? Is it the community center? Because then you get charged.
Yeah.
It's probably, I mean, the only thing in town hall proper is basically the room that we kind of meet in. Typically, that 201 A, B, and C, we can make it a large room or 2 small rooms and a medium room. So, and if you have 3 meetings going on at the same time, you can hear things through the walls. It is what it is.
They get booked very quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the Board of Ed does not like their space used. So
yes, Board of Ed is always yes.
that huge room, if that's what you're thinking of.
Well, and what people have forgotten about, there hasn't been a huge play because in the course of the town hall coming, finishing up 5 years ago, and then we had COVID, there weren't a lot of large group meetings. But one of the things that was lost, and it was lost a couple of years before the construction, but was the auditorium.
Mhm.
And we've been pushed that we need to have an auditorium, which board felt that an auditorium limits you too much, and that's why the community room aspect, which could be configured in various means. But it still is a space that is no longer available in town hall, and it would be a space that would be available within the library.
Yeah. All right. Well, I
And
think
you're-
yeah.
I was just going to say, a lot of people, you're talking about Board of Ed and space and whatever, people will refer back to the fact that the schools have the auditoriums, but again, there's a cost factor, and there's also a lack of a reluctance, let's say, to have other groups use the school auditorium.
Yes.
People
Yeah.
have their own spaces and they get
Yeah.
filled up. And then there's the problem, like custodian and whatever, if
Right,
Right.
right.
you use
Yep.
it. And you don't want to be a competition if you don't have to be.
No, I agree.
But every time we use the senior center is great during the week if we have to use them, but if we have to use them on a weekend, then we get charged extra costs because we have to pay for custodial
Yep.
on people either to be in the building or also to clean up after. So you can do it sometimes where there's no cost to us, but that's competing with whatever the senior center is doing as well.
Is
Yeah.
is there a way we can include some of that information maybe in a presentation to show, hey, we're offering this space, which is going to be offered free to the community versus, the costs, if you have to, use the space on a weekend or, at the schools or, after hours and that. I mean, that might be a option because I kept trying to push the fact that the community room could be used after hours.
Mhm.
The reimagined one or something like that, because we were trying to make it externally accessible versus having to be within the library and having to have additional staff just for to have a meeting there.
Chris, your point is well taken. I wonder how many people in town, except for maybe folks that have actually booked one of the school auditoriums or space at the senior and disabled center, really realize that you have to pay for those.
Yeah.
That just because it's town property doesn't mean that it's free. And I think a lot of people may feel that way. So, you're onto something with providing that, working that information into part of the marketing strategy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can touch base with, like, I know NCTC uses was it the Martin Kellogg Auditorium they use for their productions and plays because they don't have space in their own facilities.
They if it's the real little kids, they've used the auditorium or what used to be the gym at the Senior and Disabled Center,
Okay,
and they have their productions at John Wallace.
John Wallace. Okay, I knew it was one of the
Yeah.
middle.
But they
Yeah.
do pay for using it, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Chris,
Yeah,
Chris,
That's what I was getting at, was maybe if we know what they pay for and everything like that, it can be kind of just a number to be able to be, hey, for other events that get used, this is what they have to pay for that use of that versus the library where we have basically free space.
It's
I would
not
say
just
give
the
Chris a
Board of Ed.
call. Talk to Chris. He'll be able to give you that information.
Yeah.
It's
And of
not
course,
just the
they may
Board of
want a
Ed and the
theater
senior
space.
center. It's the
That's
Parks and
different.
Rec too. Parks and Rec, one of the reasons that the library has its race, kind of, I guess you'd call it our staging area, is outside now. For years, we were in the old Mortensen Gymnasium, and we had to rent it. The
Mhm.
library had to rent it. So, I mean, grant you, it's their space, but, and then we had to have, Parks and Rec staff there and the whole thing, it's all part of it. So, I think that some people don't realize the free aspect of what we provide. They come in and they think they can get their library books for it, but they don't realize everything else in there is free as well.
Yeah, I think these are all good discussions. I think like Chris said, I think these are points that we can incorporate in a future presentation, going forward. Um, so, so I think the next topic is that came up a couple times was what's the plan for the public outreach? And I didn't know if the board has anything specific. The library itself, or if you guys have even discussed it. Again, this is just something that so we can roll something out to council and say, hey, this is our 5-point plan. This is how we anticipate it.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
What I was going to say was George Bernaco heads up the communications committee on the board. He after he was in there at the town council meeting the other night watching the presentation and getting a lot of this feedback, and I know he had a lot of ideas kind of towards marketing for that. I also know one of the other things that we'd be potentially looking into as well is a firm that does I'll say program management that would be able to kind of guide us as far as what marketing and how to reach the most people, because it was a good point that was brought up, is that okay, yeah, we're reaching all the people in the library, that's great, they're already visiting the library, but you need a lot more votes than that if you want to get it through referendum, and there's a lot of people who don't even use the library at all, and you need to be able to convince them as well that it's a use. So I think in that case you're going to have to talk about all the other uses for the library. A lot of people may just see it as just books and that
Right.
all the other uses that they could use for it and everything that would appeal to them, as far as maybe like meetings, and if they have their own organizations that they would want to host something in or something like that, kind of appeal to maybe that aspect. But I haven't had a chance, I apologize, I haven't had a chance to look through, but as I said,
That's fine.
our communications chair, everything, he seemed to have a lot of ideas and everything, so I think we need to kind of discuss it once again with the board. Just try to
That
figure
sounds
out
great. And
And
also
he did. He came up with a very for 24 hours after the fact. He came up with an extremely a comprehensive listing, and basically springboarding from Councilor Mankey's comment about the people we need to convince are those who do not utilize the library but will vote on its future. So there was quite a bit identifying the target audience, the demographic that doesn't use the library, and then again connecting with those communities. Using digital marketing, getting community input, and basically coming with a strong community focused approach. We also could work to identify the barriers of why these people don't use the library. I mean, there were a whole bunch of concepts that he threw out there. So I do think working a project coordinator so that we're focused on this. I'm no marketing expert, so I'm like the last person you want.
I think I think that the idea here is to have a plan that looks viable. And also additionally, after the meeting, and I was actually talking to Lisa out in the hallway, and we had a discussion about the people that don't use the library. I think you need to drill in a little bit and say, do you have kids? Oh, did you know your school? They visit the library, they do things. They may not realize that their family tangentially does use the library facility, and like you said, you have to convince them, hey, did you know that the library does this? Your daughter wants to play ukulele at 6. Guess what? She can go check one out. You don't have to pay for anything, and she takes a couple of lessons or whatever at school. And these are the kind of things that we have to get out into the community and let them know that we do.
I look at the library too. Maybe I'm aging myself a little bit, but as a blockbuster too, because I like taking the movies out and everything like that. A lot of people don't realize that there's a wide movie selection there as well. So that's stuff like that.
And a lot of people don't know what VHS tapes and DVDs are anymore.
Just a couple of thoughts. Obviously the extravaganza will be in the summer, so that's a given. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of marketing and a table and whatnot. Then the charrette that we were talking about at council that's coming up in another week, 2 weeks. I don't know if any of you have. I haven't been to any previous ones, but if you haven't, that may be a place that might give you some information, you know, kind of the pulse of the community, what people are looking for, what they like, what's lacking. Um, could be informational for you as well as just, you know, being a presence there. And the other thing I was thinking of, and Eric, you just said, did you know that your child, and I was actually thinking if there's a way that maybe every week or every 2 weeks in the reminder, have a do you know or did you know, and then something about the library. So it's front and center on one of those first few pages that everybody reads and probably doesn't even bother unless they're looking for a used
Yeah.
bicycle. You know, that might be a strategy too, is it's informational and it's everybody reads it and everybody gets it. You know, there's a cost to doing that, but it's a way to get out that information, and there's so much that people don't know. And I was also thinking about, because I had raised the issue, or I raised it because I wanted one of you to talk about it, which was the connection between the library and the schools. And Leanne, you even mentioned preschools.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I don't think a lot of people know about that. So I'm
I
you know,
also think
that's
that
also something else.
I think also the senior population as well. I mean, Michelle's doing a good job going into the senior living facilities, which is helpful, but also for the families of these seniors to know the kind of services that we can offer their parents or their relatives or loved ones, whatever, that has really expanded a lot. You know, I think that's another population that we have to kind of, because we go to the senior center some, but even that's kind of a limited population in the building. But there's a lot of seniors living in town that maybe don't use the library, and that maybe they don't know what we have or what we can offer or because now that we're going to them more, I think that would be another area that you could maybe tap into.
I'm just wondering, and I'm just throwing this out there. Is there anything like a senior information fair or any like little fairs where they're
That's in November or
Yeah.
October.
Yeah.
Oh.
That
Jamie
just happened
runs
and
it.
we were there.
okay?
They do have I know they have a big dinner for their volunteers, but I don't really think that's appropriate to try to peddle information there. But there's, you know, I'm not sure. We could ask Jamie if there's other big senior events in town.
Yeah. And
They do have a monthly newsletter too, where
Right,
there's
right.
one.
Yeah, we actually provide their movies for their monthly newsletter. The library picks and chooses their movies, so we give them that
Okay.
every month.
Well, I think maybe it wouldn't hurt us to, and again, I come back to, I've been around town way too long. When we, when we were advocating to get, the elementary schools, brought up from their 1910 to 20 configurations, I was president of the PTA at Elizabeth Green and the PTO at Kellogg. The PTA and PTOs banded together, but what we did was we realized that we were preaching to the choir. So I know that I went to actually speak, and it wasn't at the senior their fair that they have in the fall. They allowed us to speak at one of their meetings that they have where they come in. So it might behoove us to do that, to go out into these groups, to actually go to and speak more directly, like take what Lisa's provided to us about how, you know, the movies are provided and the outreach and the books and the sourcing and the delivery and things like that for that particular audience. And then also to go back and perhaps hit the school, the PTAs. I mean, because the PTAs are separate groups from the Board of Education.
Yep.
We could go to these PTA meetings. I don't know how many people go to PTA meetings anymore, but to say, hey, listen, we bring the third and fourth, you know, the authors in every year for the third and fourth graders. And again, speak more more about what the library provides to that particular audience.
Yeah, in the PTAs and the PTOs that you would visit, they're going to be the very involved parents anyway. So, you
Right.
know, the 15 or 20, however many it is, and I think that's a great idea to concentrate, especially at the elementary school level, and hit those PTO organizations with, you know, just a brief, you know, as we get moving along. Um,
One other thought I had with the various groups we were talking about here and everything like that. Are we doing anything with like the Chamber of Commerce and kind of getting businesses? You know, if a lot of the businesses in town like that, and kind of, you know, we've kind of stated before about, hey, with our meeting spaces, you know, if you need to, you know, conduct local business in town and need a meeting room or something for some reason or something like that. I mean, I'm just wondering, is that another possibility of
no, that's a good one. I think they have once a month. I think they do a morning
Michelle,
coffee thing or
Michelle
whatever.
Royer, our head of community services, is actually the vice president on the
Oh,
chamber board. She's
okay.
been a liaison for a while, but that doesn't mean they have morning networking meetings and
Yeah,
they have those monthly meetings like that. That's certainly something that um would be worthwhile. Plus, we could have one at the library in the
hmm
morning and talk more about services that, you know, we've done that before, but you get new businesses, new people that we haven't done it in a while. Just have them come in and, you know, what we could offer, especially even a larger library. That meeting
yeah,
space is key for some of those businesses.
And also, I mean, for those businesses that are already, you know, a lot of those business owners are already supporters of the library. If they, you know, if we bring out the word to them and everything like that, they can even be kind of our spokespeople, I'll say, in
Right,
some aspects to the community, the rest of the community as well.
right,
This could
yeah,
also apply to the Rotary as well. There are other
yeah.
correct.
organizations in town that have a niche, but also have they're- they represent and can promote, even though they promote themselves, uh, concerning the library, because it all feeds together.
Right.
Yeah. A couple things I'll hit on just real quick. Kim said, you know, to be out there at the extravaganza, you know, yeah, we can have a table, and yes, Bill at Parks and Rec will charge us for said table, so we'll pay for
Yes, they
that.
will.
The other thing she talked about, and because I'm intimately involved, is the public charrette coming up for the town center plan. That's on March 8th. It's a Saturday, and it might be good for anybody that wants to come, and you can observe, participate even more, and you can kind of get a sense of, like Kim said, of what people are thinking just about generally about what the town center and the town, you know, what direction the town is heading. And you might be surprised it's just information you gather, and stuff like that. So that's going to be a pretty cool thing. And how charrettes work for people that don't know is basically, you know, you're going to have maps of certain areas, and you're going to get some different choices. And you know, you get a sticker. What do you like? Oh, I like park benches, and you know, you pick different things that you like, and you can suggest other things as well. And this is all going to go into the future master plan, that's going to get developed for the town center. And obviously, the library is very close to the town center, so there could be some people there asking questions like, "Hey, are they going to put a library here?" Or, you know, you just never know what you're going to get from the public. We're expecting maybe 75 to 100 people. It's on a Saturday for 3 hours. So if you have time and want to come by, please do. Even just to observe, just to see what's going on and get a sense of people, and you might be able to target certain individuals that seem, you know, engaged and enthused about certain things, you know, for moving forward. That's
And
all.
and where is this being held? I apologize, I haven't been
No,
as
it'll be at town hall and at the council chambers.
oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we'll also try and do an online version as well after that, though online versions are a little tougher. But for the people that can't attend or necessarily can't get out, you know, we'll do that and engage them somehow.
I'm just wondering if us as us board members, if we wear our lanyards just to show we're trustee members, if someone's walking around and they're asking about the library, oh, that person's from the
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. No. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So I think those are good information sources, maybe just to get a sense of, you know, anything you pick up on. I
I know,
think those were, yeah.
I know that one of the things they brought up too was swing space. I was going to reach out to the director of the Bloomfield Library because they just had to do that to see what kind of services that they were, because part of it is you have to choose what you're going to offer for a while. But
Yeah.
I was going to reach out and see what I could find out for information about how they chose what they did. And, because I think the space will be, like someone said, it's going to be dependent on what's open at the time.
Mhm.
But I could get more information if you want about that.
Anything we think that's going to be, beneficial to us, sure, look into it, get some information at least so we have it and we can decide whether we want to utilize it or not. Um, did anybody else? I mean, I think those are the two biggest topics. What, was
Well-
additional plans, fundraising and public outreach.
Well, there was a concern, and I could see this going in the direction of if we build this,
Mhm.
what the ongoing maintenance and staffing would be.
Yep.
I couldn't speak directly to it. I only had an idea of,
And I
because
think you
again,
did
to-
it. I think you did a pretty good job of it.
but I know that I think Diane, you mentioned to me, you talked to Lisa after that, Lisa, you felt that in the current configuration, the staffing we had would be adequate for the space we're talking about. It would just be if we change program aspects and things like that, we would be dealing with.
I mean, I think that like a lot of what you said is pretty valid as far as like some of what we have to do is, if you have more meeting space, it's not going to be that much more labor intensive, except if you have to set things up. And that's what we're trying to do is add more like open space, more seating space, more meeting space. So that should be less. We have better sight lines. It will be easier for staff to monitor things.
Mhm.
I'm thinking right now you try to make do with what you have and see how it goes too. I mean, I think
Right.
I mean I don't really I think we have people could have their I don't know, we could definitely like reconfigure where people are too. Do you know I think that's some of it as well.
Right, and you're not going to know until you get in there to see
Right. But
how it actually works.
I do think if you have more meeting space, that's not necessarily staff and labor intensive, except for like the booking and making sure it's ready. But when they're in there and they're on their own. So you're not watching that. The study room's the same thing. And if you have more seating, that's not us having to, you still have to monitor, but we do have a lot of like hidden spaces in the library where things have happened, things have gotten stolen. And I think if you have more open, that will be less of a problem.
Yeah, and I
And,
think that's
and we might have more, honestly, that might have more cameras as a way to monitor too. Not that you want to do it that way. And also you want to be very mindful of patron privacy for certain areas, but it's also a way to hit those certain areas that we have problems in as well.
right. And now I think the other argument is, yeah, with the open sight lines, I don't have staff running all over the place, so they have more time to concentrate on things. So they can run up and set up a meeting room, rather than shorting yourself because, oh, there's a bunch of kids in the stacks back there and we got a meeting going on.
But if you have multiple spots to help patrons for different areas, like a reference desk has 2 or 3 people, they don't all have to be together, and you could have them in different locations and they could all answer the phone, the same, the same lines and stuff. I mean, it's just a matter of maybe relocating some people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that conversation I think is easy, going forward is like we don't anticipate any staffing increases, once we get in, who knows? Like anything else, it's everything changes and is in flux these days.
Right. And services change and the way you do services changes, and you might not need to have someone doing something the old way. We can have them do something new a different way,
Yeah. Yeah.
And you had written in your notes, Eric, about the parking analysis, and yes, that was part of the architect's charge.
That's fine. Good. Just, and again, it just questions that we can answer, so we can take some of these and we can just address them right off the bat. Yes, a parking analysis was done and, by the architect and, these kinds of questions. So the other thing that I brought up, and I don't know how anybody feels about it, was do we think it's reasonable or worth it to have facilities director to look at the plan to make any comments? Not that we have to, just because he says, oh, I don't like this, that we have to go in and change it, but just to, because I think council will probably at least ask him the questions, hey, is this going to be more maintenance or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know.
Well, isn't he already being pulled in by being asked what the 250
No,
reporters are?
no, he wasn't, Leanne. He
Yeah.
saw what you were
No, but what I'm
presenting.
saying is from the meeting, they wanted to know, the counselors,
Well, now he is, yeah.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. He's being pulled in that regard. So, I mean,
But he hasn't looked at the
no,
concept.
he
Well,
hasn't
and the
looked at it.
challenge, like you say, it's conceptual, but I don't think Joe's really sat down and looked at him.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Yeah,
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think it would hurt because I'd rather have him advocating for us than against us.
Right. That's
More
kind of where I'm
input, the
going.
better.
If we can get him on board for some things, is there anything that's not in the presentation that he can look at, or you just wanted to go through the presentation and make comments? Because I can ask him when I see him, or if there's something. Is that fair? Or I don't want to overstep, so that's why, and I don't know how the board feels about that. I know Diane's here and she can probably speak to that.
I had one thing that, and this is confusion on my part, so I apologize. And I don't know if the counselor was incorrect, but Diane and I were speaking to one of the counselors after the meeting, and we were talking about the fact that, obviously this is conceptual, and if it were to get passed by referendum, then it goes to the permanent building committee. And this counselor said that no, because we were already a building committee, the LARC, that we would be under the old format. So I'm a little confused because I thought that the permanent building committee was in place, or we would be subject to this for the project. That I think it was Anna Reynolds was the only one that was kind of grandfathered in, if you will. So I'd like to get that clarified, because if, as I said, it was Councilor Plord who said this. So I just want to make sure we're all operating on the same page here.
Well, Dave and I, along with Councilor Plord, are the three people that are reviewing the Permanent Building Commission.
Okay.
What I can never remember. It's a long name. Anyway, and we've been meeting in terms of all that information. So I think between Dave and I, we probably can answer that question.
Oh, okay. Because like I said,
Yeah.
I thought that we did move on to the Permanent Building Committee, and LARC was, as Eric said, a pass-through, so to speak.
Well, we kind of did, but then it got put on hold because some people wanted to have the ordinance or the building committee plan revisited, which is what that committee that Kim and I are on, as well as Councilor Plord, have been doing. Unfortunately, it's taken longer than at least I would have liked it to have happened. And supposedly, this is just me speaking, we're supposed to meet one more time and then present it to the council for them to determine, do they like this or not. So there has always been the concept for quite a while of a central, and I've told you this before in one form or another, a central building committee.
Makes sense.
Under
Yeah.
previous orders, for lack of a better word, and then a decision was made to relook at it. And I've said several times, you can go forward with this with the old ordinance, and then you can always present the new one. But for some reason, didn't want to go forward with that and wanted to change and clarify things. Well, things have reached a fifth draft, if I'm correct, Kim, that has clarified that, and it's gone to the town attorney, and that's what's coming back to us to see what is tweaked. That's the word that's been used, to change that or not. And I've always been trying to personally to make certain that the library's interests were there and were not shifted. That's another long conversation we've had before. And so that committee could go forward and oversee, and indeed, if there passes referendum for the library, that particular building process. So I don't quite know what happened with what Counselor Plord told you or didn't tell you, or you may have misunderstood.
Well,
You have something to
and
add, Kim?
Diane could speak to this as well, because she was present with me. He gave me the impression, or the impression that I got. So I won't put words into his mouth, but the impression I got from the way he spoke was that Lark would be the building committee, which I did not think that was the way it was going to be.
That is
That's
never
not,
the
that's,
impression I got.
no.
Okay.
No,
No.
that isn't why it was not founded to do that. It was created to rework this ordinance to clarify and to clear up whatever
Okay.
discrepancies were or loopholes were, and to present a more definitive plan. And as I said, one of my goals was to make certain something wasn't switched, which was guaranteed by all parties, especially concerning the library, not to oversee what's going to happen, that our mission was completed once we presented this ordinance and it was hopefully approved by the council and gone through the process of whatever needs to be to be changed. I never saw it as being something that we had that responsibility or duty. As I said, Kim, if I've misspoken, please.
No, I agree, because I was, in my first term on the council was when that went to that it was revised, and the Permanent Building Commission was created, and that ordinance was created. And I remember at that time, and we continue to make sure that because of, there is, and we talked about this on Tuesday night, that there's a unique relationship between the library and town hall.
Mhm.
But with the library, to be sure, and to my knowledge, and I agree with you, that hasn't changed in the as we're reformatting and reviewing and revising the Permanent Building Commission, that it's imperative, I think, for all of us that the library has a voice in anything that has to do with reconstruction, renovation, creation, choose the word that
Mhm.
relates to the library.
Yeah, I would never
And
agree
Lark
to something
definitely
that
would
shifted that
not.
in a direction that
Okay.
was not agreed upon previously, and I believe Kim agrees with me.
I just, like I said,
Exactly.
I may, it was a late night, so maybe I misunderstood. Like I
Well,
said,
I'll tell you something. I wonder sometimes too, if, and I think I'm hoping that it was clarified on Tuesday night, the task and the responsibility of Lark in this whole process. And maybe that was the confusion, because Lark, from my understanding, was never to then become the building committee for a new town library.
Right.
No, wasn't mine either. That's 2 out of 3.
All right,
Well,
well, thank
you know,
you.
We
Yeah.
have the
Eric,
majority.
do you think
It's
in the
bipartisan.
presentation, like
There
the
you
final
go.
presentation, the one thing, I know Chris spoke about it, but I think we need to emphasize too, like how much we are open. I know one of the counselors mentioned it, but for the amount of money, we're what, 322, 320 something days. How many hours that is, things like that, just so people, it's not, that's a being open a lot throughout the year, and having
Right.
the building open and things like, and being able to do a
And-
lot of things.
And including Sundays in the winter months and
Right,
stuff like that
exactly.
as well, so.
And you're open to everyone. It's
Right,
not just a
and
segment
people
of the
don't have to
society.
have a library card even to walk
Right.
in the door.
Yeah.
Yep.
All ages, things like that.
Evening hours, the whole thing, yeah.
So, again, all good conversation. So just circling back to Joe and the facilities, is this something that would the board of trustees want to invite him to a meeting to have a discussion with him about it? Or do we want him to look at what's in the presentation and kind of make some comments or thoughts? Or I don't know.
I mean, I think as an initial put, I mean, if we provide on the presentation to kind of get his initial feedback, and then we can always invite him to, excuse me, one of our meetings to to further discuss, because that way, you know, I'd rather him kind of get at least a first look and kind of gather some of his thoughts and everything, and then we can have a discussion meeting. That makes sense to me.
No,
He
there are
may be
things.
aware of facilities, but not specifically aware to the uniqueness of a library as opposed to just any public building, not to belittle anything else that's built on a part of a town.
Well,
Oh.
as I said, the council has requested information from facilities regarding
Yep.
their current work orders. So he's already been or will be approached on that regard. I don't think it would I think it would actually be helpful if we could have, I mean, we're going to solicit community input. We should also be soliciting the people who have to care for the facility.
Absolutely.
You know, something, you know, one of the questions that came up was the green roof aspect, which I'm not terribly conversant in. So I don't, you know, it's supposed to be a low maintenance plant and all these other things, but I'm not the one who's going to take care of it. So,
Right.
you know, that's the kind of thing that maybe he has an insight from his own career aspects of dealing with other people. They can turn around and say, I'm not big on that particular plan.
Yeah.
I
He's
know
been,
that as a part of what I've done as a master gardener was we all volunteer at different places, and the science center in downtown Hartford actually they have a couple of green roofs. I mean, it goes way beyond anything that we're looking at the library. But they do have some sedums that are planted in certain areas. They are very low maintenance, very low growth. And I can't remember exactly because it's been a couple of years, but there definitely is a different aspect to construction when you're constructing a green roof versus regular roofing. Over time, and maybe that's something that, you know, if that even becomes an issue, which I hope it wouldn't, but to try to again look at cost benefit, that, you know, a green roof will cost this much, but it will save us this much in terms of heating, cooling, maintenance over X number of years. And I do remember that there were a couple of questions and comments about the cost of the upkeep and of the current library, even if we go back over 5 years. I think that would be really helpful. I agree that you know, how much has it cost over time with all of the different, with the leaks and the different, you know, not just the day-to-day maintenance, but the actual problems that have occurred with the building itself and how much that has cost the library in terms of time and space, and also how much has it cost in terms of dollars. I mean, that's a huge issue. And, you know, do we want to continue to pay for that kind of upkeep in a building that is becoming increasingly, I don't want to say dysfunctional, but having increasing problems as we move along. So I think that's another good point to raise.
yeah,
And if we can get those numbers, I think they can be powerful depending on how they're presented.
right, especially if you see that we're getting a 10 or 15% increase each year. You know, this is just exponentially gonna, keep going. And
Yeah, it's
functional.
yeah, it's kind of like when you compare, you know, I'm renting or leasing something versus buying something. As an engineer, I'm always thinking I got equipment, and I've had to do, you know, cost benefit analysis and show that, well, we've been paying for X number of years for, you know, every month for this when we could have bought one, you know,
Right.
and saved that much money.
All right, I think those are the main points that I was going to hit on. Does anybody else have anything else? I will, when I see Joe next, I'll just ask him to review the presentation and see if he has any comments about future maintenance or just the building in general. And then once he's done, I can let you guys know, and you guys can invite him to a future board meeting, or meet with him offline, however you think you want to do it, and we can go that route. If you think that's good.
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. I will certainly take care of that. Does anybody else have any thoughts, questions, concerns about the presentation, about the future presentation?
Well, I know the board is going to start addressing as George, our communications
Mhm.
secretary, the communications chair has addressed. We're going to start putting our skin caps on as to marketing.
Yeah, and I think there's been some good thoughts coming out of a number of different people that you guys can take back to them. And again, I think it's more of just that, develop a plan. So again, we can let council know that, hey, this is what we're doing. This is our outreach, stuff like that on that aspect.
I will ask, I don't know how far back, to be honest with you, my paper records go. So
Yeah.
I will have to explore with perhaps the town hall as well as Lisa and the library staff for those previous plan iterations. It's kind of, as we've moved along, I've kind of put them in a separate pile. So
Of course.
I have a basement full of boxes. So I'd have to do some looking, but we can start pulling that out. As to assigning dollar figures to that's a concept that I think we'd have to come back and revisit.
Yeah, I suspected as much. So, okay. If no other members have anything right now, we can go to public comment. Go ahead, Diane.
May I? Great, thanks. So I do want to echo, I know I've said it before individually, but I think you guys did a great job on the presentation, and it's hard to answer all those questions when they come through, and we're trying to do that back and forth. And then at tonight's meeting, a couple of things come up. Yes, let's get Joe involved from a facility standpoint, have him look at it and say, hey, what about this? What about that? I think that can be invaluable. I know Stan from Town Planning and Zoning, he has seen a copy of the plans and looked at it and said that he liked it. He liked the idea of the solar panels. He liked what was going on. He asked about the parking. And I think the reason he had reached out to me was because there were a couple of other things going on in the town's Garfield lot. And I think it was around some of the EV charging stations and stuff like that.
There are, yes.
Yes.
That
What's
project-
going on with that, and how are the two going to mix, right? So the more we can talk to people about what's happening and what's going on, and there's always the confusion about, where's the property line, who can do what, where, how, and when. So that's important. We also talked about pricing and what other things are, and I pulled up the Manchester flyer that we had, and interestingly enough, their renovation, they were asking for $50 million. And that was, with some grants in there and everything else. And then they said, but the schematic price is $53 million. I think at the meeting, we tried to talk about or point out some of the price or the cost for some of the recent buildings that we've done. And the fact that Anna Reynolds was $35.5 million and it was all on one floor. It was spread out. They had more room to do that. We have no place to go but in our 2 acres and and up, right? So that's the 2 full second floors as that goes through. And again, from the Lark idea, it is now our understanding, and has been for a year or so since they first put together the plans for the permanent building committee, that Lark brings it to town council. Once it goes through renovation, it becomes part of the permanent building committee. If that changes, or if the permanent building committee isn't ready, we were always told, well, you stay in this for now until that goes. So that might be what's leading to some of the confusion of what's happening.
it could
But
be.
it's our understanding that the actual build out will happen with the permanent building committee. And, I think whoever put that together originally, I know Dave and I had many, many conversations on it. There is representation for the library because of that quasi-public, whatever. And there's more representation for the library than others, as you might think, in terms of voting representation. Because of the way that ownership works or what happens. And I know Dave's looking out for us, and that's not going to go anywhere. So again, appreciate that. You did bring up Weathersfield was doing a $1.3 million or whatever, but that's really just a facelift refresh. That's not the renovation. I think we know that they did a huge renovation, and was it 10 years ago? Because it seems like yesterday, but I know it was pre-COVID that they did that.
Yeah,
be
I mean, there
longer
is
than
a few,
10.
there is a little bit of structural, but it's not like what we're asking for at all. It's completely different.
No, they already did that, and that would be interesting to see what that is. I think it's interesting too to figure out what the current amount of monies are. We spent $500,000 20 years ago, 15 years ago, if you want to be conservative, to get that property and go in. So where would we be without that? Of course, we probably wouldn't be having the discussions, right? We'd be doing book studies at a Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts on the corner of that lot there, maybe. One of the other things, and I'm sorry, it just escaped me, with the monies, with the project costs, the architect facilitated that, but it actually goes out to a construction manager. So we might be able to, with some of the older designs, I know our Carrie did some of our original renditions, and I think there was even an earlier rendition from Castle Booze who did the 88, somewhere in between the Obama Ready and stuff like that. But I don't know.
Castle Booze was 2008, and then our Carrie was around 2016.
Right, at the town hall, kind of thing. So we might be able to use those schematics and get pricing for today's dollars with the construction manager. I don't know how detailed that is or whatever. I mean,
it's really just updating, because I think council, I think they're going to say, they're going to want to see a plan, but I think they're also going to want to see a number attached to it. That's my gut.
Right. So the only way to do that is to hand the plan off to a construction manager and say, what would it cost me to build this today?
Yeah.
Right.
The only concern I have there is that it implies that these options address all of our needs, which they don't.
Well, and those can be caveats.
Yeah.
I think all of it has to be brought up. If they're asking to see alternates, we have to show them, look, in 2008, this was our plan. This is why we changed this plan. And oh, by the way, if we were to build this today, it would cost X. Right?
And it's not sufficient.
Right. And I think our biggest problem is that everybody's going to look at the price tag and nobody's going to look at anything else. And I think that was the biggest downfall for the town hall, because it was supposed to come in at $30-something million. And they said, it'll never get passed, bring it down to 28.8. It did get passed then. And then through CIP and some other creative things, guess what? It was right back up to, 32 million.
It's up to almost 35 if you count OFI.
Well,
They'd
now
also asked for additional things that were not in the plan at all, which increased the costs.
Right. Post that. And as we've spoken, there is no teen center, there is no auditorium, there is no whatever, because they were downsizing. The purchase of OFI, because we're downsized or we're hurting for space in the town as that goes through. So, it's kind of like, I like to buy the economy car with 4 seats, but I got 6 kids. I need the minivan, right? How do you do that space? How do you get that pricing? So somehow I think that's our biggest challenge in getting people behind the project is coming up with why the money's like that. Personally, I think that if we did a smaller renovation, we wouldn't get what we need. And then we would be going out again to add on to that as we've done it for town hall. And that just keeps adding and doing the price overall. I think, Chris, you mentioned the, do we lease or do we buy? And then after a while, it's like, look at all this time and energy we've spent. So I think those are our challenges. I think marketing, Lisa, you had mentioned maybe a virtual tour when we had talked about doing the tours and stuff like that. So I think that could be very interesting. And I think when we do that, we really have to talk about what happens in those areas. And you have to talk about what happens in those areas for a Martian who has just landed, because, book speak, collections. What's a collection? To me, that's a bunch of Hummels that my grandmother had, right? That's a collection. So I think when we say it's circulation, what are people doing and how many people are there and what's happening could be a little bit more descriptive in terms of what's going on from that end. And I think that was it when I was running through things. I think it's great to get anybody else involved that we can, whether it be Rotary or Chamber of Commerce, anyone else.
Yeah, and it sounds like a communications person is on top of it and will be able to help a lot with that.
Yes, and I think we are looking into that other person to help with communication, pre-referendum, getting the information through and out. So again, thank you all for the work that you're doing. It continues to be a lot of work, but it would be wonderful if we could get this passed and start building a new library that really meets the town's needs. So thanks.
Well, we're going through the process.
Diane, everything you just spoke to, or you spoke about, speaks to transparency. And I think that is really important. People need to feel, not only the council, but just our community in general need to feel as though the information that they're being given is correct, that we are being transparent and answering the questions. I felt that, you all did a great job in terms of fielding and answering questions the other night. And if you didn't have an answer, we're clear that you were going to go back and gather that information. And I think that goes a long way in terms of having a sense of trust and believing that, well, you know what, they're going to do what they say they're going to do. And, we may be gasping at the price tag at the moment, but they're explaining the reason why. But you're also listening to what the questions and taking into consideration what people have to say. So I think that goes a long way.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. If there's no other public comment and nobody else has anything, we can adjourn and we'll meet again our regularly scheduled one. I think it's the fourth Thursday, so we have one in March. I don't know if the board's meeting in the interim, but anything you guys can address, that's great. Like I said, I will reach out to Joe and try and get him to put an eye on this and garner some comments, and then we can move forward after that and see what we need to do.
We have a board meeting a week from Monday, the second Monday of the month, and I'm sure facilities will be on the agenda, and whether we have another meeting or not between now and our LARC meeting, I'm sure will be determined.
Okay.
Can I just suggest too, Joe can meet with facilities, the facilities committee, and that can be brought forward to the meeting, or he can come in and speak as part of public participation, or Chris, you can invite him as a guest, to come, whatever works for Joe and the team to see what happens or what goes on from that end.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you in a month or so. Any questions, you know where I am. You can email or call me.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.